part of the harassing communications was you sending a picture.
No.
That makes me lose respect for Marcus.
If it was true.
I assumed it was true.
You assumed it was?
Now that he's saying that it's not true, how do you feel about it?
I don't know if I believe Marcus.
You don't believe me? I've been a liar about things that we've been through over the years, and a lot of experiences that you've had with me. I've been a liar.
Yeah.
Sometimes the loudest stories aren't the ones people shout. They're the ones hidden behind carefully chosen words, controlled expressions, and moments that don't quite add up. And right now, that's exactly where Marsau Scott finds himself, standing in the middle of a narrative that feels emotional, complicated, and just a little too polished for everyone watching from the outside. Because when Marsau started talking about heartbreak, when he hinted at betrayal, when he allowed the world to see even a small crack in his usually composed image, people leaned in, they listened, they tried to understand. But instead of sympathy alone, something else started to grow. Questions. Real, uncomfortable questions. The kind that don't just challenge the story being told, but the person telling it. And what nobody expected was that this wouldn't turn into a simple moment of vulnerability. It became something bigger, something messier, something that forced people to look back, connect dots, and ask whether the pain being presented was the full truth, or just one side of a much deeper story. Because sometimes when someone says they've been hurt, the real question isn't just what happened to them, it's what role they played in the story too.
About my family, go ahead. And I'm gonna see how true Tisha gonna stand on what she's not gonna accept in a marriage.
But you just said, you said we weren't doing that.
There's nothing that Markel's gonna bring out the phone.
Bring it out.
That's actually gonna show.
It is.
Show what you gotta show.
Show it.
Show it. Show what you gotta show.
You show it.
No.
Oh,
You got your woman
I'm about to
too.
go.
He the one talking about my family. What the
Show what you got in your phone.
You show what you was talking about.
I'm talking about between me and you. Yeah.
This is a conversation between me, you, and her.
Okay, show it.
Please show it.
To understand why the internet isn't fully buying what Marsau is saying now, you have to go back, not just to the recent headlines and emotional interviews, but to the foundation of who he has always presented himself to be. From the very beginning, Marsau carried himself like a man in control, confident, calculated, and focused on building not just a career, but a legacy. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but he didn't need to be. His presence spoke for itself. He had ambition, direction, and a clear idea of what success looked like.
What made you lose respect for me? Because what you're saying right now isn't even true. So I'm up here telling you what the truth is, and you still say that you have no respect for me. So I'm saying, okay, it must be something deeper. So what is it?
And beside him stood his wife, a woman who matched his drive, supported his vision, and built a life with him that, from the outside, looked solid. Together, they represented structure, stability, and partnership. They weren't perfect, but they gave the impression of being grounded, balanced, unshaken. At least, that's what people believed. But here's the thing about public relationships, especially ones that play out in front of cameras and audiences. What people see is never the full picture. It's edited, filtered, shaped into something that fits a narrative. And over time, that narrative can become so convincing that even the people living it start to believe it's real.
Where's your wife at? She my favorite on the show. Go find her then. Shit, where Tisha at? Tisha getting pampered. Yesterday was her birthday.
Let me check my goddamn
Right, right. Because I know I got a private investigator following her little cheating ass. So I'm gonna find out because she wanna. Tisha ain't the kind of person that be sitting there taking that shit. She wanna just get back. She wanna cheat back. So I gotta watch her.
For Marsau, that image mattered. Being seen as strong, being seen as disciplined, being seen as a man who handled his business and his household with authority. That wasn't just part of his personality, it was part of his identity. But what nobody talks about enough is the pressure that comes with maintaining that image. Because when you spend years being the person who always has it together, you don't leave room for mistakes. You don't leave room for vulnerability. And you definitely don't leave room for people to question you. So when cracks started to show, they didn't come in obvious ways. They showed up in tone, in body language, in moments where conversations felt a little too tense, a little too controlled, and people noticed.
If I'm your woman,
and you are my man. When I ask you for something, why the hell you get mad?
At first, it was small observations, comments here and there, viewers pointing out that something didn't feel right, that the dynamic wasn't as smooth as it appeared, that there was a certain distance, a certain tension that couldn't be ignored. But those observations never turned into anything serious, not yet, because Marsau, as always, stayed composed, until now. Because when he finally opened up about feeling hurt, about feeling betrayed, it caught people off guard. Not because heartbreak is surprising, but because of who was saying it. Marsau wasn't supposed to be the one speaking from a place of emotional pain. He was supposed to be the one in control. And that's where everything started to shift. At first, people were willing to listen. They gave him space to tell his story. He spoke about disappointment, about feeling let down, about situations that didn't go the way he expected. And on the surface, it sounded real. It sounded like a man finally letting his guard down. But here's the twist. The more he talked, the more people started remembering past moments, past behaviors, past situations that didn't quite align with the image he was now presenting. And suddenly, the narrative didn't feel so simple anymore. Because while Marsau was talking about betrayal, the internet was asking a different question. Betrayed by who and why? That's when things started to get complicated, because people began revisiting old clips, old conversations, old patterns that had been overlooked before. Moments where Marsau's actions raised eyebrows, times when his words didn't fully match his behavior, situations where accountability seemed to be missing. And once those moments were brought back into the spotlight, the story changed. It wasn't just about his pain anymore. It became about perspective. Because what one person calls betrayal, another might call consequence. And that idea, it spread fast. Social media didn't hold back. People started sharing their opinions, breaking down his statements, comparing them to past actions. Some defended him, saying everyone deserves the chance to express their feelings, that pain is pain, no matter who you are. But others weren't convinced. They questioned the timing, they questioned the framing, they questioned whether this was true vulnerability or a carefully crafted moment designed to shift public perception. Because, let's be honest, in today's world, people don't just listen to what you say, they watch what you've done. And in Marsau's case, there was a history that couldn't be ignored. There were times when his approach to relationships seemed rigid, moments where his tone came off controlling, situations where empathy didn't seem to be at the center of his decisions. And while none of those things alone told the full story, together they created doubt. So when he spoke about being hurt, people didn't just hear his words, they weighed them against everything they had seen before. And that's why the reaction wasn't purely supportive. It was divided. Some people saw a man finally facing his reality, someone who had spent years holding everything together and was now dealing with the emotional cost of that pressure. They believed his pain was genuine, even if imperfect. But others saw something different. They saw someone who might be rewriting the narrative, someone who was stepping into the role of the victim without fully acknowledging the role he may have played in creating the situation. And that difference in perception, it created tension. Because now every word he said was being analyzed, every expression was being questioned, every moment was being dissected. And instead of bringing clarity, his openness created more confusion. Because people weren't just asking what happened, they were asking what wasn't being said.
And that's a hard place to be in. Because once the public starts doubting your version of events, it's almost impossible to regain full control of the story. For Marsau, that meant facing something he hadn't had to deal with before on this level. Scrutiny that wasn't just about what he did, but about who he is. And that hits differently. Because it's one thing to be criticized, it's another thing to be questioned at your core. Behind all the conversations, all the reactions, all the opinions, there's still a human being at the center of this. A man who, whether people believe him or not, is navigating a moment that's deeply personal while being completely public. And that kind of pressure changes you. It forces you to reflect in ways you might have avoided before. It forces you to confront not just what others have done to you, but what you've done in return. It forces you to sit with uncomfortable truths, even when you'd rather focus on your own pain. Because heartbreak isn't always clean. It's messy, it's layered, it rarely has just one side. And for Marsau, this moment may be less about proving anything to the internet and more about understanding his own reality. Because no matter how many people support him or doubt him, the truth is something he has to live with every day, in his relationships, in his decisions, in the way he moves forward from here. And that's where the real impact shows. Because this situation doesn't just affect how people see him, it affects how he sees himself. The image he built, the control he maintained, the confidence he carried, all of that is being tested. Not by rumors, not by speculation, but by the weight of his own story. And whether people believe him or not, one thing is clear: this moment has shifted something. Maybe it's his perspective, maybe it's his approach, maybe it's the way he understands love, trust, and accountability. Or maybe it's just the beginning of a much bigger realization. Because sometimes the hardest truth to accept isn't that someone hurt you, it's that the story is more complicated than you want it to be. And as the conversation continues, as people keep watching, questioning, and forming their own opinions, one question still lingers in the air. Is Marsau telling the whole truth, or just the part that's easiest to say out loud? Because until that answer becomes clear, the story isn't over. In fact, it might just be getting started.